So this is the Getting Started with Sugar Hot Topic webinar this week, and specifically we're going to talk about the 5 steps to implementing sugar. Now last week we had Getting Started with Sugar, the sugar fundamentals, right? Just the basics, like what do you need to know about sugar? Like what is a module? What is an account? What is a lead? What do you do when you convert a lead? What happens? What's the typical flow of a lead to a closed deal in sugar? How would you follow that through? All of that was in last week's session. If anybody wasn't able to attend it, that's okay. Please email university@sugarcrm.com and I'll be happy to, we'll send it to anybody on my team, but they'll be happy, if it's not me, to send you the link to the recording of last week's session. Okay, more than happy to do that. So because it kind of lays a little bit of foundation. If you're not as familiar with sugar, some of the terms that I may talk about in this session, I'm assuming that you know them already. Okay, but if you don't, please let me know in chat and I will briefly define it for you, okay? So if I say some terms or I cover something that doesn't make sense to you, please let me know, okay? All right. So to start off, this is me. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a remote employee of Sugar CRM. I'm coming up on my 6-year anniversary with Sugar. I work in the Sugar University department. I am the senior product trainer and instructional designer, and I am certified Sugar administrative specialist. So if any of you are interested in doing any of the specialist type of things, you may want to check out our certification tab or page on Sugar University. Okay, it gives you all the information that you need for that. And I'm usually teaching the admin class. That's every month. So there's one next week, which I think is actually sold out. We've maxed out that class. But there is an August and September class, which I'll talk about at the end of the webinar. Okay. So this is me. Just real quick, because I know everybody can't introduce because I have a lot of people, I just want to make sure everybody knows how to use the chat. So in chat, tell me where you're from. If you're in the U.S., tell me the state and the city. If you're in another country, tell me the country or the province you're in. So I have Ohio, Cleveland, Atlanta, Miami, Indianapolis, Germany, excellent, Los Angeles, Cupertino, great, Mexico, San Jose, all right. Another Mexico, great. Tempe, Arizona, excellent. Glad you've joined us. Anybody else want to share? All right, so we've got some international, another Mexico, great. Oh, I'm glad. It's probably closer maybe to your time zone. Good time for y'all. All right, thanks for letting me know. Now you know how to use chat. So if you have a question for me, put it in chat for me, okay? Yes, Shane says it's great to see the sugar community growing. Yes, it is. It is kind of good. I like it. It's nice to see where people are from. All right, I'm going to jump right into it, people. Y'all ready? Here we go. Here are the 5 basic steps to getting started. The first one is we're going to prepare for success. And I know that's kind of a what I call fluffy kind of concept, and I'm going to make it more concrete with you when we actually go through the step. I just needed a title for it, okay? We're going to talk about defining our user access and permissions, which is a pretty important part, and it's something you're going to do before you even start configuring your system, okay? Number 3 is we're going to create a user experience, okay, to enable and improve your business processes. So that actually is a pretty big step, all right? And I'm going to go through it, you know, like I said, this is only an hour presentation. I'm going to go through kind of the high-level things that you would do, all right? Obviously, if there is more configurations that you need to do on top of what I'm going to tell you, you can do those. And I'm going to say something like create new fields. Well, I can say that in like 3 seconds, right? But it may take you days to add all the fields that you need, right? Or even to put them in the layouts that they need to be in. So I may say something very quickly, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take you that amount of time to do it. So keep that in mind if you haven't looked at Sugar's configuration yet. Not that it's hard, it's just going to take you time to do it. After we create that user experience, we need to enable it. Okay, and we need to enable it by actually importing data, and not only just data, clean data into our environment. And also we want to talk about enabling outbound email. A lot of people forget this step and they go, yeah, we don't need email. So I'm going to tell you why you'll need it and what's the importance of it. If you want to use some of the features that we have that have great benefits for your organization, you'll want to enable it. So that's in that step. And then finally, we're going to talk about the deployment of Sugar and how you empower your users to use it. We want high user adoption, right? You want to encourage them and motivate them to use Sugar, because that is probably the biggest, out of all these steps, the 5th step is the biggest obstacle to user adoption. It's not that you weren't prepared, it's not that you didn't plan, it's not that you didn't configure the system correctly or put in the right data, it's that are your users even using it, right? And if they're not, then maybe this step is the one that you need to focus on, okay? And I've seen it happen again and again, and I don't mean just Sugar, I mean any CRM. I've been on a CRM implementation when I was at a bank many years ago, and it did come down to the users at the end. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to start off with preparing for success and what this means. So I've got 6 puzzle pieces here, okay? 6 things that I want you to kind of think about when you're dealing with preparing, okay? You're getting started. You haven't actually gone through all the steps. Don't just jump in and go, let's configure. I want to get my hands on the system. There's some things you need to do first. First, you need to determine your key players. These are the people that are going to be essential to the success of Sugar in your company, all right? And depending on the size of your organization, especially if you're a very small organization, one person may have multiple responsibilities or roles, okay? So for example, you need an executive sponsor, someone to champion the project, to set the business vision of the deployment of Sugar. You need a process owner that knows the sales process steps and maps them to Sugar. Could also be, if you're implementing it for support or for marketing, you may also need additional process owners for those areas also. You need a Salesforce administrator, so someone who is over the Salesforce of your organization, and they know how to set up Sugar and manage it day to day. You also need a data subject matter expert that owns the data. You know, they need to know if this is clean data or not. Is it the correct data? Is it the right information? Not necessarily the administrator of Sugar is going to know all that information. And you need you need champions, okay? They serve as your liaison to your users to ensure that Sugar meets that day-to-day need, business need of your organization. That's why you purchased it, right? That's why you wanted it. Also, you need to identify what type of support you're going to have. Okay, is your implementation going to be through a Sugar CRM partner, or is it going to be implemented on your own? Okay, if you're going to self-implement, I've given you a link on the materials panel, that hyperlink to the slides. This is the link to our documentation. So it takes you through not only an overview of all of our modules and what they do, but also through that kind of implementation steps. So first you need to set up your users, and then you need to set up your teams, and then you need so-and-so, okay? So you'll have to go through the documentation itself. Now, if you want to use a Sugar CRM partner, maybe you don't have one right now. You haven't purchased necessarily Sugar yet. Maybe you're thinking about it. This link will take you to our Sugar CRM partner link, and it will take you to a map. Pick the area that you live in. Let's say you live in South Africa. You click on Africa, and it will give you all the partners for Sugar CRM, our company, that will help you implement Sugar. Even things like data migration. They want to migrate your data from the previous previous CRM to this CRM. You need to have the data cleaned. You need to have configurations done, or maybe even code customizations. So what do you do about that? How do you do it? Have a partner help you. Okay, they are kind of a branch out of our company, out of Sugar. We have certified these people as our partners, right? They are a branch out of our company, and they will support you. And if you need additional support beyond that, they will contact our support team and get you answers. But your first line of defense, if you have a partner, is have that partner be your support, right? They are there to help you through the implementation. So if you feel that self-implementation is not the way to go, check in with the partner, okay? Now, one of the things that's not on the screen is if there's anyone on the call that you actually bought Sugar, the product, from us directly. You bought it directly from Sugar CRM. You called one of our sales guys. Then you have our support team to help you through that. You also have the ability to purchase professional services, which is like a partner in that they can step you through that process also, okay? Next, you want to identify and prioritize business objectives. And I know sometimes when you say this stuff, people are like, oh, business objectives, eh. But think about it. If you don't know what your vision is of your implementation, you don't identify your organization's pain points, how are you going to address them? How do you know that Sugar is actually addressing all of those issues? Okay? You need to capture and prioritize those goals and define the measurements to determine if you're going to even be able to achieve the fulfillment of that goal, okay? This step right here is one we're going to come back to on step 5, okay? Did you actually fix those pain points, right? Did you achieve your goals and your vision of this implementation? If you don't know that, then you won't know if it was a success or not, right? So make sure that you have addressed those. Even if it's just written down somewhere so that someone knows later after you implement, you can come back to those and see if you actually met them. Did you actually meet your business objectives? Also, define your success matrix. Understand what you will use to measure the success of Sugar, okay? So across if they're using it, how is the data quality? Are the users satisfied? And the business performance. You may have to ask questions like, are users logging in? Who's logging in the most frequently? Is the training helping you perform your job? You're going to have to ask your users that. What is the quality of the leads that you're getting in Sugar? Things like that will help you determine if you're successful also, okay? So kind of set up those kind of matrix or understanding surveys, questions that you're going to have to ask and know so you can measure that quality. If people are not logging on, they are saying they're not getting the training that helps them perform their job, then you make corrections, right? You fix those particular areas. Also determine your validation approach, okay? A successful implementation includes user validation, period, okay? And ways to gather that feedback to determine if you are meeting your objectives, okay? How are you going to include your users, right? Think about who will be involved and what you will need for user validation. Who will validate the Sugar application? Will you need to test in a sandbox will you test in a sandbox for configuration, or do you need to avoid, say, the end of the quarter? So what kind of constraints are you going to have to work around in order to make sure that your implementation is a success? Like, don't implement on July 31st. Probably not a good day, right? And sometimes maybe not the 1st either of August. So you may want to do it in the middle of the month. You may want to avoid the end of the quarter, things like that. Okay, so make sure you think about that approach. And it's amazing how many people sometimes forget about this, especially if the team that's actually motivating it is not really in the day-to-day of the sales approach, like the admin is in IT, and he just, hey, that sounds like a good date. So kind of think about that with the entire team that you're working with. Okay, this is another one of kind of those fluffy things that people go, you don't have to worry about this. But you need to create a communication plan. It may make perfect sense to you on your team, how you're going to deploy it, what your timing is going to be, what are the topics, how you're going to build enthusiasm, but anyone outside of your little group in your organization has no clue what's going on, right? They don't know when Sugar is going to deploy. They don't know anything about it. They don't know why you even bought it and why you're implementing. Why do we need a CRM? So you need to kind of have some ideas. What are you going to do pre-launch? What are you going to do when you launch it? What are you going to do post-launch? Are you going to have users tips and tricks meetings? Are you going to have little reminder tidbits during a staff meeting? Are you going to have some instruction sheets available during launch, so when they get stuck on how do I do XYZ in the system, you have it on a kind of a cheat sheet or a user guide, simple one-handed handout to hand to them, a quick reference, okay? So kind of think about those things. Make it specific to your organization, all right? So now we're going to talk about step 2, all right? So we talked about how to prepare. This is getting everything ready to then, now we've made some decisions. We already know who we're going to, what area we're going to affect. Let's say if it's just sales, you go, okay, so here's the sales team. Does everybody in the sales team need to have a user access? Okay, maybe not. Maybe not everybody does. So whoever those people are, we need to enter those people in, and then we need to give them certain access or restrict certain access, okay? So let me say one thing before we go to the next slide. Out of the box in Sugar, we have a very open environment, meaning that once you create a user, if you don't restrict anything for them, they can do any type of operation, meaning they can delete a record, they can do a mass update of a record, they can import records or export records, okay? You, as an administrator or someone in your organization who is an administrator, this step is where you start restricting that access. Or you may have like a sales lead or a sales manager that you want to give them a little bit more access, and that's also in this step, okay? So let's kind of break it down into 3 areas. We're going to talk about users, teams, and roles. So what is a user? All right? A user is how Sugar identifies the individual in your organization who is going to utilize Sugar. Say you have 50,000 people in your company. Only 5 people are going to be on Sugar. Okay, in this first, sorry, 10. I said 5. 10 people are going to be on Sugar. But next month or 3 months down the road, maybe that's just your pilot, you're going to add another 60. Okay, so you need to know who those people are going to be. Everybody else in your organization is not going to be a user in Sugar. All right. They may be affected by it or have maybe be able to see some type of report that's sent to them via email, but they won't be able to actually log on because a user is how Sugar authenticates that person or you in the system with the username and password. So that means you have to have a username and password to be a user. Users can be assigned records and they set their own preference settings. So if they want the modules at the top of the screen to be in a different order, a user can do that. They can set up that preference. And we learned in the last webinar that that's called a personalization. They personalize their own page or their own dashboard of how they want to see information. Okay. The next concept is teams. So basically teams mean who can see what, right? What can a group of people, because that's all a team is. A team is a group of users. It could be 2 people, right? So if this were all users on this particular group, this is a team, and specifically we're going to name it the Northwest sales team. Okay, it could be the Mexico sales team. It could be the Northern India team. It doesn't matter what you label it as. That group of people can have access to certain records if you assign it to them. So let's say we have a record, Amy Miller, and it's assigned to the Northwest sales team. Well, this group of people that you see here on the screen, they're going to be able to see that record. All right. If we have another record, Henry Adams, and it's assigned to the Southeast sales team, this Northwest sales team will not be able to see that record. So it simply means what they can see. That's all that a team does. It has nothing to do what they can do with that record. Can they edit it? Can they delete it? Can they export it? That doesn't have anything to do with any of that. It's just can they see it or they cannot see it. Okay? One moment. Okay, so the next topic, or the next kind of access we're talking about, is a role. And a role is basically saying what operations, or what can they do with within a module. So if we just took this first row right here where it says accounts, do you see right here? And then it says access is enabled, the access type is normal, and then it has all of the operations, the delete, the edit, export, and so on. So for you see where it says delete, export, and mass update, they're all set to none. That means all the users that I add to this particular role will not be able to, meaning that it will not even be on the screen to delete an account, export account, or do a mass update. Okay? If I look at the one that says owner, that means only the person who is assigned to a particular account record will be able to edit that record. So if that record is assigned to Joe and Carol signs in and looks, she can see the record, right? She can see that it's assigned to Joe. She won't have the edit button. She won't be able to edit that account because only the owner, which is Joe, can do it, okay? It's a pretty good security feature. Just think about that. Also, you may want to say, okay, I'm going to allow all the users in this role to be able to import records, be able to see the record in the list view, and also see the detail record of the detail, the actual record view itself. Okay, so it's just been different ways to set up the security. Now, in our admin class that we teach, we go through how to set up users, teams, and roles. Okay, there's also a self-paced class that goes into much, much more detail about each of these and all the little components and features within each one that can give you a little bit more detail. And I'll point out those self-paced classes in just a minute at the end, okay? If this is, like I said, this is very high level. So in step 2, we learned what a user is, someone who's authenticating the system, how to add them into what we call groups of, they're called teams, to allow them to see certain records, and roles will say what they can do with those records, okay? So I just have some additional resources. They're also in the slides. There's an actual training video on creating users, teams, and roles. We have documentation specifically how to create a user, how to create a team, and how to create a role. And then I think these are pretty good resource because they are directly from our customers. Okay? When customers call into support, if they get lots of questions about a particular thing, they write a knowledge base article. And there are several articles on team management and role management. A lot of people sometimes get those confused. You know, which one are we talking about? Is this a team or is this a role? How do I change them? These articles are really great. And there are more than one. This is just a heading. Okay? So those resources are available on you, for you on the resource page. Okay? So I have a question in chat. I just wanted to let you know that asked about, do you have to have a logon? You don't have to have a logon to see it on the page, but if you actually want to view the, let me think a second. You don't have to have a logon. You can just watch the videos on the self-paced, but if you want to take any of the courses, you do have to register and purchase them. Okay? So make sure that's clear. All right, so now that we have our users, teams, and roles set up and we've prepared for success, we're going to create the user experience. All right. So the first thing in creating our user experience is that it's a good idea to determine your sales process. Now these are just examples. These are some of the out-of-the-box sales stages that we have and kind of definitions of each one, and these are our definitions. Right? Your organization may need a completely different definition and completely different sales stage. Just an example. But you need to determine what those are and how one progresses to the next step, which will help you with the next thing, the configuration. Once you know what your sales process is and how the cycle is going to go from one thing to another, who's going to do what process, and you need to gather certain things at each step, then those gathering information will tell you the fields or the modules or the records that will be affected by that particular process. Okay? So when you talk about configuring Sugar, this is at a very high level, okay, so keep that in mind. Configuring in Sugar has to do with things that an admin does, okay? And when I say configure, I mean things that can be done out of the box. Some of the things in your process you may determine need code customization. Customization means you're going into the code, the back end of Sugar, and making, affecting Sugar in that way. Configuration is going through the UI, the user interface, and making changes within Sugar. All configurations are upgrade safe, meaning that if you make a configuration in Sugar and you go to the next version of Sugar, it will convert or upgrade to the next version, okay? So in that, there may be certain modules that you want to hide, right? You don't want to use those modules. You're not going to use them maybe for this particular rollout. Maybe next quarter or next year you're going to roll it out for a different area, so you need to hide them. So let's say you're just doing it for sales. Okay? You're not going to use the cases or the bugs or the knowledge base modules. So hide them, right? It's not deleting them, you're just hiding them. What makes it you want to make it as simple as possible in the Sugar, when you're looking at Sugar, so that they're not distracted by a bunch of other modules that have nothing to do with them that they don't need. Okay, so hide them. And when I talk about hide a module, I'm saying hide it for everybody, not a role that says you disable a module, but you're saying no one needs to see cases, so hide it. Okay, I'm going to show you how in just a minute. Also, you can rename modules. Okay, we just give you a starting point with our out-of-the-box product, right? You can take it and mold it into whatever you need to. It's flexible enough for you to say, you know, you got this module called bugs, but we don't, bug tracker, we don't use software, we don't sell software, so I want to just call it internal issues. Okay, fine, rename it, call it something else. You don't like the word leads, you want to rename it to prospects, that's what your sales group calls it. Fine, rename it. That is totally possible within the configuration section in Sugar. Also, you may need to change the layout of a page. Okay, the way that it looks is all set up incorrect. That your users won't be used to that. It's missing fields. You need to add some more fields on there. You need to take some of those fields off the page. You can do that within the system in Studio. Also, and this may seem minor, but I think it will give your system a little bit more validity if they see your company name rather than our company name. You can change the logo on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen in Sugar to put your logo in. Fairly simple thing to do. I'll show you how to do that also. And also, especially for those of you that are going to be using currency that's not just US dollar, or you're going to be using languages that's not just English, you need to be able to add those currencies or modify the languages. Okay, so we give you several languages out of the box, and the terms on a particular field may be called something, but keep in mind if you rename a module, you're going to have to rename that module in all the languages that you support. So if you rename leads prospects in English, you're going to also have to do it for Spanish if you support Spanish, or Italian if you support Italian, and so on. Okay, you'll have to do that for every language that you support. Okay, and you can determine if you're not going to support all of them, remove the ones out that you're not going to be using. Okay, because out of the box, someone logs on, they can pick the language that they want to see Sugar in. Okay, so let's kind of break it down. Let's say that, for example, you're looking at this account and see there's a module up here at the top called Contracts. It's also this sub-panel on the accounts page called Contracts. Well, you've decided, you know what, I don't want to see those on my screen. You can go into Sugar, and there is a section called Developer Tools on the admin page, and you only, if you're an admin user, that means a super user, you can go in and actually hide those modules. Okay. If you want to rename things, so we call things leads, accounts, opportunities, you've decided you want to call them prospects, customers, and deals. Well, there is a section on that same Developer Tools section on the admin page called Rename Module Tabs. Okay. Let's say you want to modify your page. Okay, so in this, I've decided to actually have it as tabs. Out of the box, it's not tabs. It's a business card, and then it says a show more, and it falls back on the page. But I've reorganized it to have tabs. I have business card, addresses, and more information. Okay, so I've modified that. If I want to add a new field, I can do that also. Rearranging layouts, adding new fields, adding new relationships between modules, all that's done within Studio on that same Developer Tools section on the admin page. Okay. Also, let's say you want to add a logo on the screen. So your logo. So that bottom left-hand logo right there can be changed on the settings section. It's underneath Systems panel on the admin page. Now, the only restriction they have about that is it can be only can be a certain size, right? If you have a ginormous, I don't even think that's a real word. If you have a huge logo and you going to want to put it on the bottom of your page, it's going to be distorted, right? It is a very long and skinny, thin label. So it gives you the pixels, max and min for what you need to put into that particular space, but that's under system settings, okay? Now, in our admin class, we teach you how to do all of this, okay? We actually practice how to do all these things, okay? Now the currency and the language are actually in two different things. They're both underneath system settings on the admin page. The currency will allow you to add any type of currency that you want, whatever that conversion rate may be, whatever the ISO 4217 code is. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it and it will tell you what the code is. And then whatever the symbol is. If it's a euro, you put the euro symbol. If it's a peso, the peso symbol, and so on. Okay. Also for languages. So out of the box, here are all the languages on the left side that are enabled. If you are not going to support someone, let's say you're not going to support French, so you can drag that language over to the disabled. Okay. That means that the user won't be able to select it from the languages on their preferences. Okay. So if you're not going to be able, if you're not going to change module names, you're not going to change labels of fields, any of that, or add, if you add a new field in, you're not going to put it for that particular language, you need to disable it. Okay. Like I said, keep it as simple as possible. Okay, here's a good question in the chat. Sorry. Is it possible to hide a subpanel from a specific module without deleting their relationship? Okay, so the background of this, if everyone doesn't know this, if relationships that come out of the box with Sugar. So let's say there's a relationship between accounts and contacts. Okay, one account can have multiple contacts. One contact can only be linked to one account. All right. If you don't want to see that's a contact subpanel on just the account module, there's not a way to do that. That's either hide it for all on all subpanels or display it for all subpanels. If you want to do that particular thing, Angel, you actually have to go into the code to do that. You cannot do that within the user interface. Okay? Hope that makes sense. So out-of-the-box relationships can't be deleted, and it's you see the subpanel for that particular module on all of its relationships, or you don't see it. So all or nothing, okay? But it can be done within the code if you want to do it. Okay, so just some recommended sessions for this. We do have an admin Sugar Administration Essentials class. It's once a month. And guess what? In the future, we're going to start charging for this. So for the next 3 months, it's free. So if you want to take it, you better take it the next 3 months, July, August, or September. And July's is sold out. So there's August and September available. If you want to attend it, covers how to do all of those particular things. There's also the developer tools section in the documentation. And then there's several knowledge-based articles under Sugar Configuration and Studio and Module Builder. Module Builder will actually allow you within the UI to create a brand spanking new module, call it whatever you want, have any layouts you want, any fields you want, connect the relationships to whatever modules you want for that brand new module. Okay, and all that's going to be coming from that planning that you did in step 1. You know the modules that you need based on that. It also may come from the sales cycle you come up with. If there's something in your sales cycle that you need another module to capture that information, then you may need to build a module, okay? Which we also teach you how to do in the Essentials class. All right, just checking my time here. All right, looks good. Oh, sorry, and there's also workflows. Workflows are just a way to automate your business processes. Let's say after every closed deal that's over $100,000, usually someone runs a report and checks out all the ones that are, and they email that person's manager with the next steps because it's a high-level opportunity. So if you want to automate that process, you can do that within our workflow management, okay? Which is also underneath developer tools on the admin page. All right, so we talked about how to prepare for success. We put our users, teams, and roles in. We've configured our system, meaning that we created that user experience. And number 4 is, I don't know why screen did that, we're going to enable the user experience, okay? So this is, so now we have this empty shell of all the information the way we want to gather it, but we don't have any data. We don't have any records, right? So we have to enable it for our users. We can't just expect them to have this blank shell and start using it blank, right? They need to be able to have all the records, all their customers that they're working with now inside of Sugar when you go live. So you need to enable that. And when we talk about enabling it for the customer, this step of enabling the user experience is not only composing, to compose an improvement in your user's confidence in Sugar and achieve those business results by migrating your data or maintaining your data, but also it's going to be setting up that outbound email so that all of those records that kick off workflows that you want to do some kind of marketing mass mailing for, or you just want to email your customer from inside of Sugar, you need outbound email set up. Okay, and I'll talk about more of the benefits in a minute, but we're going to start with importing. So before we jump into, let me show you the import wizard, there's also another way of importing your records, and that's through data migration. And Sugar provides the REST APIs, which can be used for, if you understand that, which usually is by developers, to import your records directly into Sugar. And usually you're talking about mass record migration with multiple relationships between modules. If you have like a spreadsheet, or you have a very simple CRM, I'm not going to name any, but if you have a very simple CRM that only has a few modules and you're going to just import those modules one by one into Sugar, then you're going to use the import wizard for that one module. Importing wizard only imports to one module at a time. Okay, it doesn't say, okay, I'm just going to import all this data and then Sugar just knows where to put it in what modules. It doesn't. Okay, the import wizard is more for I had these new leads that came from this conference. It's 2,000 of them. I need to import them into Sugar so that my sales reps can start qualifying them. Well, that import wizard would be great for that. If you have hundreds of thousands of records in one module and it is related to several other modules and you want to import that information in Sugar, you're talking about data migration. If that concept of data migration is kind of blowing your mind, you don't even know what REST APIs mean, then you may want to go back to that Sugar CRM partner to help you. Okay, that's what they're there for, to get you through that data migration, to get you started in that implementation. Okay, does that make sense, the difference between the two? We also have a importing data, it's training videos that's on this link here that will take you to the actual page. There's actually two of them. There's an overview and then actually using the wizard of how to use the import wizard. Okay, but at a very high level, these are the steps when you're talking about importing data. No matter if you're talking about data migration at a very high level, these are steps that you would go for. Obviously, you need to extract that data from wherever it's coming from. You know, if it's coming from one of our competitors' CRMs, you have to get that data from them. Depending on the particular customer, you may have to contact them and they have to send you the files. Sometimes you can actually export the files yourself. Sometimes you can't. Next, you may need to clean your data, especially if you're coming from a CRM that people were using all different fields for all different types of data just because there was no other field to collect that information, and you weren't able to add fields yourself with your CRM, so where people were putting weird things in different fields, you may need to clean it, okay? If you don't clean it, have you heard the adage, if you garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you put garbage in Sugar, then your data is going to be garbage when it comes out of Sugar. So make sure it's clean before you go in. We'll talk about what that means and how you do that in a minute. Prep your data for Sugar. Prep Sugar for your data. So if there are fields in your last CRM or your last way you were capturing information and you don't have it in Sugar, this is that back to that setting up your user experience, right? You need to have those fields configured in the layout so there's somewhere to put that data, right? If you have data in a field in your old CRM and you don't have it in Sugar, guess what? You need to put it in Sugar if you want it to import into the system. And then also perform the import. And there's some steps in that I want to talk about specifically. So just at a high level, when you extract your data, if you're talking about the import tool, if it comes out of your old CRM into Sugar, if it comes out as a CSV file, it's already ready to come into Sugar because we accept CSV files into Sugar. There's also a knowledge base article on how you would do that. And then again, I've put the link to the import video too. Cleaning your data. Here's just some high-level suggestions. Remove identifier fields. So if your old system said ID number and then it has 16 number letters on it, that's your old CRM number. You don't need that in Sugar. Sugar gives it its own ID number. Every record has a unique identifier, and it will try it will look and say, oh, there's an ID number, do you want to map that? Well, it won't map correctly because that ID number doesn't match what we would give that record. So remove it. You won't need it unless you're using it for something, okay? That's a different answer. Also remove any duplicate records, okay? If you're looking at your data in a spreadsheet, it's very easy to see where the holes are, okay? Remove all those duplicates. For the fields that say, if you need, let me say it this way. If you need to have the original date created on your record, then you need to create a new field in Sugar that says original date created or something like that, because the date created in Sugar is going to be the date that you imported it, all right? But if you need to keep that original date created, you need to have that field separate from our Sugar's date created field. I hope that makes sense, okay? So you need to add the field so that you can keep it if you want to. If that's important to what you do within maybe your sales cycle, you need to know how old that particular customer is or that particular contact or that opportunity. Weed out all your old data. If there's data from decades ago and those records have been closed out or leads that have been dead for years, then delete it out. Weed out all that old stuff. Concentrate on getting the data as complete as possible, right? There may be some fields that you have never filled in. The address isn't complete, you don't have all the emails, but they're in a different place. Maybe they're in a spreadsheet or they're in Outlook on their contacts, on your sales guys' Outlook contacts. Then get that data and complete it, okay? So a question in the chat is, does Sugar keep any record of who, when, what data was imported for audit? So it does not, on the user interface, it's only going to track when the record was imported. That's going to be the date created for that record. But the who and the when is only going to be tracked after it's imported. So if a field that's marked as an audit field is changed, it will keep who did it, when they did it, and what they changed it to, what was it previously. But on the import itself, the only thing that it's keeping that a user can see is the date created, okay? Now on the back end, yes, okay, Marcus, on the back end, yes, it's keeping that data, but it's not going to show up on the view log for that record on an import, okay? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? If not, I'll try to say it a different way. Yeah, okay, cool. Also, verify your drop-down values. This is pretty important, all right? If you spell something specifically, like let's say negotiation review, and you put it in negotiation or negotiate review in your drop-down in Sugar, and it's negotiation review in your data that you're importing, it will reject. It will error that particular record because it exactly has to match whatever the value is in the drop-down, okay? Exactly matches the display value. Also, make sure you add an assigned user column if there's not one there already, so that when you import, it will actually go into that assigned user record, okay? So you don't have to go later into mass update and assign the records out to the correct people, okay? So when you prepare Sugar to accept your data, this is a screenshot of a studio page for accounts, and this is just a listing of fields that are there. If you need to add a new field, you would go into this area and click Add New Field, add all the fields in that are not there in accounts, so that when you do the import, it has somewhere to go. Okay? Even if it's not, and you pop it into the record view, even if the layout isn't exactly the way you want yet, when you get to this port, maybe you forgot a field that you didn't put in or you need that data, you can add the field in Studio and put it into a layout. Later you can worry about where it shows up in the actual view. It's just so that when you do the import and you check it afterwards, it's showing up in that field. It did the import correctly and it mapped it to the correct field, right? It's for your eyes only to verify it. You can always go back into Studio, into the layout, and change where the field shows up, okay? Step 4 is to perform the import. But before you do, we always suggest you do a test, right? Don't import 20,000 records the first time out, right? Create a very simple version of your data. So if you're talking about a CSV file, take 5 rows of records, that's 5 records, and start off with that. Import it and then save your settings inside of Sugar. So when you're ready to do the regular import, it will, hey, I did these 5, everything mapped correctly, I did all the mapping correctly. Because mapping may take you a long time. If you've got 50 fields, 75 fields in accounts, and you're mapping all of these, this is what it's called in my old system, this is what it's called in Sugar, and then when you don't want to have to, after you do the 5, if you didn't save it, to do it all over again when you're doing the rest of the 20,000, okay? Also, when you're ready to import all the other records, make sure you import accounts first, then contacts, then all the other records. The reason why I say that is because if you import accounts, and then you import contacts and the name is the same for the account, meaning you're doing it from the same spreadsheet, maybe the same CSV file, it will connect the 2 records together. Okay, it will link them, meaning that contact will be in the sub-panel contacts on that particular account that should be linked to. Got another question in chat. Can I create new fields and import data into those fields or only into this standard out-of-the-box fields? Okay, so when you create new fields in the system, in Studio, as soon as you create the field, even if it's not in a layout, as soon as you create the field and you click Save and it says Done after it's finished loading in, and you could do the import right then into that field if you want, and the data will be in that field. You can import into any field that you configure in Studio, okay? As long as you import it correctly. All right, any more questions about import? So we're about to go to outbound email. If you do, go ahead and put it in. It's okay. Keep typing, and I'm going to keep talking, all right, just because we're getting to the end here. So in outbound email, let me talk about why, because this is a question I always get. So do we really need outbound email? Like, what's the purpose of it? Why would you need it? Well, for two levels. If you're talking about from the system side, from an administrative side, outbound email is what sends out all the notifications of assignment. So if a user assigns a lead to a sales rep, an email, by default, it's checked on their user profile, will send an email to that user to say, hey, this record's assigned to you, and even gives them the link to the record. And you can even say who it was assigned from, who assigned that to them, okay? That can all be done through outbound email. If not, there's no other way that they would know it unless they were in Sugar and looking at either a dashlet or looking at the list view and looked at their records. Also, if you want to do any kind of marketing, mass emails, or any kind of email to your users inside of Sugar, you need outbound email set up. You also, if you're doing any emails or invites through workflows, I have a workflow, this happens, this condition happens, and then it should trigger an email or an invite to a meeting, whatever it is. If you don't have that email set up, nothing's going to trigger, right? It will not have that last step if your outbound email is not set up. Also for personal, meaning that each user, if they want to send an email to their customer, they have a hyperlink on the email when they're looking at it inside the record. And Joe Smith contact has joesmith@abccompany.com. If they click on that link, if outbound email is not set up inside of Sugar, then nothing's going to happen, right? So if they want to send from inside of Sugar, okay? If it is, it brings up the compose email inside of Sugar and they can type the email out. It already is going to have the to line, the from line from them, type a subject and the actual text, send. Now, Sugar itself is not a mail server. Let me say that again. Sugar is not a mail server. Outbound email needs to be set up, it's called email settings on the admin page, through your mail server, okay? It relays information to your mail server for outgoing email, and then it always comes from your email. So if I wanted to look at my email, let's say for Microsoft Exchange, inside of Sugar, as long as outbound email set up that's connected to your server and my personal settings for my email are set up, I can see my email inside of Sugar, and I can see my email, let's say in Outlook. Okay? If it's Gmail, I can see it inside of Sugar, and I can see the exact copy of those emails inside of Gmail. Okay? Just depends on how you set this up. Now, some resources on this. There is two knowledge base articles that I reference, and this bottom one is actually a recording of a webinar that I did about emailing in Sugar 7 for end users. So after the outbound email is set up, then what does the user do? How do they set up their email account? Okay, because they have their own email address and password, right? So after outbound email is set up, then your end users can set up theirs, and they can email inside of Sugar. They don't have to get out of Sugar to email their users, okay? They're in one system, and they can do everything within it, right? There's a lot of perks to actually emailing inside of Sugar. Outlook plugin is great, but it's more steps than if you just emailed inside of the system itself, okay? Now, I get that sales reps sometimes want to do it the way they've always done it, and if you want them to continue to do an Outlook plugin, as long as they're PC users, then use the plugin, that's fine. But if they do it inside of Sugar, it saves a whole lot of extra clicks for them in the long run. And if you want more information about that, watch that particular video right there on this particular slide. Okay, this is slide 37, just so you know. Okay, so we've prepared. We've created our users, teams, and roles. We've configured the system. We've set up all of our sales, the sales process and our sales stages. We enabled Sugar. We've imported all of our data. We've set up our outbound email. Now we're ready to deploy. So what does that mean? In that deployment process, we need to make sure that our users, the people that are going to use the system, so at this point, obviously they've been testing as you go along, right? Your super users, make sure that it's working, but when you're ready to actually deploy, you cleaned out dummy data and things like that, then what do? Well, first of all, to be a success, you need to have a plan for training. All right, what are you going to do? How are you going to train these people? Are you not going to train them? What's going to be involved within that? Being in the training arena, obviously I think this is fairly important, but it is fairly important in the whole scheme of things to make sure your people know what they're doing. Marcus, I'm going to answer your question in just a moment, okay? I see it on the screen. I'll get to it. You also want to drive user adoption. Really, really important, right? You've done all this work to get Sugar ready. You've configured it. You've spent days and days working on this. And if no one uses it, then what? All that work for nothing? So you want to make sure that people are actually using it. How do you do that? And then you want to track and measure. This loops back to step one. Remember how you set up all those business objectives, all those ways to measure? Then, okay, now let's see if they all, how we actually need to do the measurement and see and track it and see if we were successful. So when you plan your training, you identify your audience. If you're just talking about sales, is it just going to be these particular job titles? If you're talking about customer support, are you talking about a customer support rep, their lead managers, executive managers, and directors? Who does that involve? Determine the relevant scenarios. Depending on the group, the scenarios may be different. If you're going to train something, make sure you train it with the scenarios obviously in your organization. When we train at Sugar, I'm doing these kind of out-of-the-box kind of trainings. I'm doing, typically this is what you would do kind of process, but each organization has their own process. They have their own terminology, their own verbiage about certain things and the way things need to get done. So make those scenarios specific to your particular group and their particular role. Define the training path. Okay, so when we were talking about this before, what is prereqs before they even go to training? Well, maybe they need to watch the Getting Started with Sugar in-user video, just to talk about what modules are, what records are, things like that. Then in live training, maybe you have two sessions. You have how sales uses Sugar, and you also have another one, how to manage a sales team using Sugar, okay? So maybe a sales manager goes to both sessions and a sales rep only goes to the first session. Then you need to have a post-go live. What are you going to have to continue the fact if new things happen? How are we going to change those? Tips of the week, a short training of how-tos during the staff meeting, whatever that should be, okay? Come up with that plan. Then you need to drive user adoption. So you need to motivate. How are you going to encourage your users to use sugar? How are you going to support those users if you have questions about them? Okay? Motivating them may be as simple as this. If you don't enter your opportunities into sugar, then you won't get commission on them. It's pretty motivating. Support may be during the first 2 weeks, there's going to be a open door policy or open door time or help desk time between the hours of 8 to 5. And someone's going to man this desk, this phone number, and you can call them at any time and they can help you with any type of sugar problem that you may have. They're going to manage that for the first 2 weeks after deployment. Or you may have cheat sheets that you're going to send out based on issues that have come in. You also may need to engage them. So how are you going to connect with these users? How are you also going to understand or get feedback from them? Okay, it may be as simple as having a meeting once a week at the end of the week and saying, asking the same questions every week and saying, so what issues did we have? How do you feel about it? Is it working for you? Are you using it? Now you can always see whether they're using it on the back end through the tracker reports, but if you want to ask them, you know, what are you putting in the most? How is that working for you? Does something need to change? And then you need to loop back, which will motivate them, and actually make those changes, right? Can we change the layout of this page? It would be easier if you move these fields around. Okay, great. I'm going to make those changes. Come Monday morning, they'll be done. You'll be able to see them. Okay, those things may be an encouragement for users, like you're hearing them. Okay, so consider these things when you're talking about user adoption. Also, track and measure. So in this particular section, when we're talking about tracking and measuring certain types of data, you may want to measure the sugar usage. So we have tracker reports within the system, but you may want to know how do you know if the users are leveraging sugar at all? What actions are they taking based on your observation of that users? So even on the tracker reports, it will tell you the records that they're clicking on. Or are they using a lot of call records? Are they using a lot of meeting records? Maybe they don't understand there's a difference between task and calls, and they're putting everything in a task when it should be some of them are meetings, some of them are calls, and some of them are tasks. Okay, that will tell you some of that information. You also want to measure the data quality. How will you keep your data up to date and valid for users that are using sugar appropriately? So when you look at leads that someone has imported in, are they importing all the information that they need to? If they're not, maybe you need to make a field required at import so that they do have to actually add that data in. How do you access their satisfaction, right? So there are a lot of survey tools that are out there. Some of them are even free that you can access to know how you determine if pain points that we talked about maybe in step 1 are being addressed and if sugar is helping the users reach their goals, right? Are they actually being able to close deals? Are they getting leads that are qualified for them? Are they converting those leads into opportunities and closing those opportunities? If you have revenue line items, are they putting revenue line items in on the system? So there's ways to also ask them how they're satisfied. Is it meeting their particular goals? And also, just those success matrix we talked about in step 1, right? Or all those matrix that we talked about in the prepare for success step reflected in reports or dashboards that show data of how the users are actually using it, first of all, which is a good thing if they are actually in there, and is it meeting those specific matrix that you set up, okay? Does that make sense? All right, before I go to the next section, I have a question in chat, and I said I'd go back to it. If users email from outside of Sugar, do they need to have the Outlook client open concurrently? So if they email, say they don't have Outlook open and they click on a hyperlink and on their profile it says use their external email, it will actually open up Outlook and open up the Compose email. So even if it's not open, it will open it, okay? Just like if you were in any other web page and you clicked on a hyperlink to send something to whatever email address, it still opens up your native device's email, whatever it is, and to send the email. So it doesn't have to be open but at the time, but Sugar will open it because it needs to have that compose email screen open. Okay? If you're syncing information, like you're syncing your contacts or you're archiving email from Sugar to Outlook or Outlook to Sugar, then both of them, yes, have to be open in that instance. Okay? But if you're just sending email inside of Sugar, it will open up Outlook for you. Okay? Hopefully that answers your question. All right. So just some recommended Sugar resources. And this is kind of a generic page in that it takes you to the first step where this is located. So I may have people online that are on the professional edition. Some people may be on Ultimate, and some people may be on 7.2 and some on 7.5 and some on 7.6. So I just took you to the documentation page. You need to determine the edition and the version of Sugar. Okay? I'm going to show you real quick. If you don't know how to do that, you go into Sugar. You're going to go to the drop-down menu where your name is, okay, or your picture if you put your picture in, and you go to the About selection. Go to About on that user menu, and inside of that, this is where it tells you the edition, which is Enterprise, and this happens to be version 7.6, okay? And that will tell you what documentation to go to. So if I'm in that, this is what I would do. I go to Documentation. I would want to look at the editions first. I need to pick my edition, which is Enterprise. And 7.6 is the correct one. And if I need to go to the admin guide, I would pick this. If I need to go to the end users, I would pick this. If I wanted to look at the developer guide, I would go down here. Okay? But there's guides on the portal if you're going to use the customer portal, if you're Enterprise or Ultimate Edition, any plugins like the Outlook plugin, or mobile. Here's an installation and upgrade guide, a portal deployment user guide, and then even the supported platforms. Okay, all 4.7.6. There's also the knowledge base articles there by user and then my topic. Then if you need to enter a case through our support team, if you're working with a partner, you need to go through your partner. If you've bought Sugar directly through Sugar, our Sugar CRM, then you can go directly to the support portal. If you're a partner, also you could go through the support portal. And then there's also just some recommended Sugar settings. I recommend that you look at this because sometimes people complain about Sugar's running slow. Sometimes some of the settings that you may have configured inside of Sugar are what are affecting that. Okay, so if you, I recommend that you check out the Sugar settings that we recommend as a best practice and make sure you're using the right browser and the right version of that browser. And there's other types of settings that are also available there that you may need to change, like how many records show in a list view, for example. So just check out that type of information. So just once again, prepare for success, define your users, which is users, teams, and roles, create your user experience, configure the system the way you need to. You may even actually have to use customizations in order to create that customer experience, or that user experience. And then you need to enable it by providing the data in the system, either through data migration or through the import wizard, and then also setting up the outbound email. And then you need to deploy. When you deploy Sugar, make sure you empower your users correctly with training. You have that communication plan in place, and then you measure your success. Okay, so you loop back to one and make sure that that preparation that you did and objectives and vision was correct. Okay, here's just some upcoming training that we have that's coming up, our live training links, and then the hot topics. Next week's is how sales uses Sugar. So it's a great next step for those of you that may be implementing at a high level. This is typically the way that sales would use Sugar within the system. The next week, July 30th, is what's new in version 7.6. So if you haven't upgraded yet, you're interested to know what those features are, make sure you check out that webinar. And then if you're an Enterprise or Ultimate Edition user, we also have a module called Revenue Line Items. And that particular hot topic is available on August 6th. Okay? So also check out the developer training and the admin training that are live. I think there's training for the admin already out there for August and September. Okay? Thanks so much for attending today's session. I appreciate any feedback that you may provide. I wanted to also just put on the screen here our, if I can spell, university@sugarcrm.com. We'll contact anyone. I'll also add it into chat for you. On my team, if there's any feedback that you want to provide about this webinar or any future webinars that you'd like to see, you're also going to receive a quick little link in an email later when you get the recording on this particular hot topic, and I appreciate any feedback about that. Okay, so just make sure that, let me send this to everybody. If you have any questions, to email my entire team, and they'll be able to at least put it on the roster, maybe for a hot topic coming up in the future. So thanks so much for all of your chat and making the class a little more, or the session a little more interactive. Appreciate your attendance, and good luck with implementing sugar. And don't forget to register for next week's session, How Sales Uses Sugar. Thanks so much. You'll have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining today's session. Bye-bye.